Well, hello everyone. As you can see, my usual, well, you might not know that these are usual AV curses that follow me around, but it's happened a few times where a laptop just does not do the AV it's supposed to do. For no reason at all, despite working perfectly well in every other environment than the actual environment that it's supposed to run in. But hey, it worked on my laptop. So, going a bit about this, who am I? I am basically a cyber security, information security person that does many things. I'm intentionally vague about this for various reasons. But on the side, I do various things such as communities, handle some CTFs, do some CTF challenges, go to conferences such as this one, and yeah, I basically am an extremely silly person in general. So, what is this talk exactly about? Or rather, what is this talk not about? So you might have seen the word decentralization and you're like, well, this is going to be something analogous to maybe blockchain, Web3, all that bullshit we've been hearing for the last 3 or 4 years. And no. So just as a preface, there's no snake oil or vendor bullshit in this at all. This is purely my own opinions. They are worth exactly what they're worth to whomever they are worth to. So if you disagree, that's fine. We can talk about it over a beer. I'm fine with this. There's nothing relating to academia at all. I might cite 1 or 2 papers on accident. I'm not doing it on purpose, but to add the best graphics for the situation. And yeah, it's not this. What is this talk about, though? Well, actually, it's old stuff. About as old as the internet. Because our current understanding, blockchain, Web3, cryptocurrencies, all that stuff, the things that we most commonly nowadays associate with decentralized services, or at least if we've read a post or if we've read someone talk about it, it's usually in reference to these types of systems. No. Many systems from way back in the day already made use of some form of decentralized architecture. And although we won't be talking about it, as in not as the core focus, we will still have to address it, sadly, because it's a matter of making certain that the words we use are the same ones on both sides of the presenter stage. You need to understand what I'm talking about, and I need to be certain that you understand what I'm talking about. So, yeah. And the end-all goal of this talk is really like, given current trends, what people are saying, how it's being shipped to people, we can really ask the question, like, is decentralization a good thing? Just in general, a blanket statement. If you know any kind of blanket statement in cybersecurity, the answer is always going to be invariably, it depends. So, spoiler alert, it depends. But, moving on. Part 1. Let's already, nick the buzz in the egg or whatever. We're going to remove the whole buzzword aspect of decentralization. Because it is a buzzword. And everyone has a different meaning for it. So, it's a trendy topic that everyone, from yourself, myself, someone's uncle, some politician somewhere, some CEO somewhere, and a lot of experts, some deservedly in quotes, some deservedly without quotes, have opinions on. But it's currently a hotbed of innovation, and it's becoming a core theme in a lot of discussions. Not only in Web3 kind of oriented spaces, but decentralization in, for example, the Fediverse was a core topic of C3 Camp this year. So the Chaos Computer Club's camp in Germany, which was fun. The official definition, I'm saying official in quotes because that's the one that you'll find on Wikipedia if you're actually looking for it, is decentralizing the underlying infrastructure of the internet, shifting away from centralized data storage and management, and relying on newer protocols. This says nothing. These are words that are stringed together that mean everything and nothing at the same time. And there is a bit of a semantic hiccup. For example, if you have a big corp, let's just call them big corp, that are a social media company, And technically, a social media company will have multiple servers all around the world to cater for availability, to cater for just the chance that one of their servers goes down, to cater latency, to cater all of that jazz. But since it's the same service being on multiple instances across the globe, is it decentralized? That's where the semantic hiccup comes in. So my own kind of take on decentralization is purposefully fragmenting the internet into smaller pockets that are not controlled by mega corporations or governments, but by organizations, foundations, or people, or whatever combination of, let's say, free people without the entire weight of conglomerates and other money-driven institutions. So, I mentioned that decentralization was an old-ass topic. Well, it became a trending topic again, but it's not really new. Like 1989 was the World Wide Web. If you look at this graphic, hopefully it renders big enough, yeah, all of these servers are in different places. The information is accessible from most of the places they're routed to, but the servers, the physical information itself, is located in multiple areas. So the World Wide Web technically is a decentralized store of information. So it's not a new concept. And so, like I mentioned, it was talked about really at the Chaos Computer Camp. Because it's coming back, and a lot of services we use nowadays, or some of the ones we are taken to use more and more nowadays because other services are dying in a fiery pit of dumpster fire, radioactive dumpster fire, are also in that vein, and we need to actually get back into it and understand what the challenges are and how everything is building up to a freer internet. So in our everyday lives, we use a bunch of services for daily purposes, right? We want to do communications, we use Signal, we use WhatsApp, we use Telegram, we use the phone. If we're talking about like actual texting, there's a bunch of other services that exist. But the more commonly used ones are in there. iMessage as well, but that's a bit more proprietary. Social media, you have your Meta Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all that bollocks. Video streaming, YouTube, Netflix, Prime. No, Amazon. Why is it Prime? Whatever. And then for blogging, so if you want to talk about blogging nowadays, where do you find blogs? Half of the time, half of the blog posts are on Medium. Fair enough. They have an infrastructure that works. They have a way that is easily accessible for people to post information onto the internet and attributed to them. However, a bunch of people have also taken to LinkedIn for blogging, which is like, okay, fair enough, you do you. But if you look at the entire providers, the list of companies that are behind this, you could potentially call this Fangmageddon. There are a bunch of companies in that sphere which are tied back to like a few companies. So the entirety of the services we use daily can be tied back to a few companies. Maybe slightly less because as cybersecurity enthusiasts or professionals, we use many more services, for example, for threat intelligence, for all that jazz. But the core ones we use in our day-to-day lives can sometimes be traced to this. But these don't exist in a vacuum, right? There's many other platforms for all these use cases. If we want to talk about communications, well, Matrix, for example, is one of them. The Signal protocol, not Signal protocol as implemented by Signal, but the Signal protocol is open source. You can implement it yourself. You can take a library that uses it, whatever. XMPP also works. IRC, well, the previous ones were mostly all encrypted. Tended to encryption. IRC is definitely not. Social media, for example, you have Mastodon, you have Pleroma, you have Pixel Fed, you have all of those services that exist for social media. Pixel Fed is something that is more analogous to Instagram. Why not? It exists. Video streaming, PeerTube, Plex is proprietary, but you can still host your own libraries. And you don't get ads if you're watching someone else's Plex, unless you're something's been fucked up in the last, I don't know, X time since I've used Plex. So are these things as glorious or omnipresent? Do you hear about them in your everyday life? No. Do they have all your favorite people on them? Also no. But they are symptoms of a freer internet. I'm saying symptoms because they're not necessarily the cause. They are, however, derivations of what people can build if they're confronted with the question, how can we take this away, our social media, our video streaming, our everything, from big corporations and hosted among people, communities. So if we look higher than just the services themselves, the freedom of choice itself might seem vaguely bleaker. How many small domain registrars do you know? I see some people smiling there because they all know what I'm going to mention at some point. But how many small hosting providers do you know? How many cloud infrastructure providers do you know? Like, you think cloud infrastructure provider and you have like the big names. You have Google Cloud, you have AWS, you have everyone. And you're like, there are only so many names that come to mind. So we seem doomed, entirely doomed, to basically have big corporations handle some part of our freer lives on the internet. Or are we doomed? That's the question. There's also options. So if we talk about domain registrars, well, there's smaller registrars. Boeckh is one. There's other ones. It doesn't take it does take a lot of effort to set one up. A bigger effort to maintain it. And their selection of TLDs might be smaller by a significant margin. But they do exist. Hosting providers as well. A lot of people, well, first of all, you can start by self-hosting. Not everything needs to be a DigitalOcean droplet. Come on. And you can also just rely on smaller local providers. A fully static HTML page does not need to be hosted on AWS. You can host it on a Raspberry Pi, for fuck's sake. And cloud infrastructure providers? Yeah, you can find some. Now, of course, AdSense is against you because big companies are paying big money to keep themselves at the top of the list. But they do exist. They might not have as much availability. Say there will be one rack somewhere in fuck all the middle of England. But it exists. And that's kind of the fun thing. Now, of course, if you're doing this for business, you might have another issue, which is just, legal SLAs, all those fun questions of compliance. People wanting to shoot themselves in the audience, apparently. But that's fine. But to summarize, decentralization is more of a rebrand new topic than a really new topic of discussion. It's existed since, the internet, since even before. The telephone network at the time was decentralized in a way. You couldn't make a call from X to Y international without going through a few hubs. And so decentralization is possible to an extent, and with a non-negligible amount of sacrifices in terms of availability, in terms of where you can get the information, in terms of latency, in terms of all of that, on most of the supply chain, which is good. Now, I did say we'd have to address a topic which I don't like at all. But you hear decentralization, you think those words. Cryptocurrencies, blockchain, etc. Yeah, we have to open that parentheses. I'm sorry. I apologize. And yeah, I have some. Cryptocurrencies take control of finance from big banks. Or protects people from retribution because they can make payments which can't be traced back to them. Allows people to escape forced poverty. Or gives disenfranchised people an opportunity. And unequivocally, this is bullshit. Just, there's one case of cryptocurrencies, which I won't mention, but being useful for a good thing, and that's about it. And a lot of people know what it is, and I'm not going to elaborate. But finance was really never centralized, was it? Like, you think money isn't centralized. First of all, money isn't real nowadays. There's no real not every single pound you have is leveraged against by an amount of a physical whatever in a vault somewhere. That just doesn't exist anymore. Plenty of payment systems exist, whether official or unofficial. You can have country-level instant banking. In Switzerland, we have Twint. The Netherlands have Ideal. Those systems exist. Ideal, whatever. But those systems exist and allow people from the same country to transact without actually being entirely tethered to their bank. Okay, if you want to talk about something that's slightly less official and wildly more illegal, Hawala. Does anyone know what Hawala is? Show of hands. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah. A honor-based system where people at one end put in money and people at the other end of the world have money delivered to them. I'm oversimplifying it grossly for the purposes. It's a ledger system based on honor for off-the-record transactions. Doesn't seem like it works surprisingly well. And banks can't really operate alone. Like, for two people that are on two different banks to have, like, money from A to B, there needs to be relationships. At least from A to B, or from A to C, C to B. It doesn't just exist in a vacuum. And so when you think about it, it's more of a worldwide postal system for money. Just oversimplifying grossly, but that's kind of what it is. And so cryptocurrency only has value if real money is basically backing that value. So the concept we call fiat. Banks are still involved. If you want to take money out in an ATM, you can't just put your Bitcoin card in and expect it to work. Unless someone that I haven't found out has made an entire financial processor based entirely on the concept of Bitcoin straight to dollars, but still at the end of the day, it's another currency coming out. So yeah, other claims that I'm going to address much more quickly. Protection from retribution, it's the literal opposite of anonymity. It's a signed immutable transaction statement. How more or less anonymous can you get? Allows people to escape forced poverty or gives disenfranchised people opportunities. One does not simply acquire cryptocurrency for no value. One can acquire a small amount and wait for it to rise, but if through the magical hopium of whatever, that's just not effective. And also, like, everyone is able to mine, right? Well, no, because if you have more money, you can buy more rigs to mine more and get richer quicker. And everyone else is then disenfranchised the same amount, except more, because the entire power they use to mine, well, they still have to pay their utilities at the end of the day. So, yeah. So, a TV series called Almost Human back in whenever, 2000s. 2015, I believe it was. Did one series based entirely upon a dystopia of, like, a future world with a bunch of androids and all that jazz. They had adopted Bitcoin as their transaction system with, like, sticks you could poke and, like, currency would magically transact. Still a dystopia. People are still poor. Like, I don't know. This reality is just whatever. So, for example, if you've looked at the news in the last 2 days, and this is the last I'm going to mention about anything about cryptocurrency, yeah, so Binance is giving over all their books to the Fed. So, this is going to be fun. Not for anyone in that world, but I do expect a lot of the rest to be fun and based on a bunch of things. Anyhow, part 2. Going deeper into, like, this entire scheme, the Fediverse is a beautiful system. It's a collection, as the Fediverse.to, the main reference for everything, is a collection of community-owned, ad-free, decentralized, and privacy-centric social networks. Is that the actual definition of it? Well, I disagree, despite it being, like, one of the main sources citing this. It's like, it stretches what a social network actually consists of. Video streaming, is YouTube a social network? Technically, you can post and interact and post content, but are you really going there to have a conversation with someone? No. Picture hosting. Are you going to have a conversation with someone? Same question. Journaling. Same question. Digital libraries, etc. Same question. But all those things exist on the Fediverse. Just, it's part of the entire scheme. So if we want to go deeper, Matrix and the Matrix protocol, for example, you can choose to host or not a server. You can just take an official server. You can go on someone else's server. Fine. Matrix protocol is open source. It's reasonably well documented. And the end-to-end encryption around it has been audited publicly. The findings have been released. The comments on those findings have been released. All of that is viewable by yourself and myself. Okay, you might not have expected this. Email. At a base level, it's just information being sent between systems hosted in various places. Okay, if you're hosting your own email server, which most people will tell you don't, which all speak the same language, vaguely, protocols being protocols. And we could encrypt it end to end. But okay, a show of hands, has anyone here actually used PGP or SMIME in the last month? Okay, that's actually vaguely half of the room, which is surprising. But otherwise, the messages are just being sent, of course, enveloped in the entire TLS, etc. scheme. But the information is still readable from the servers on which it is. So, yeah. We mentioned Mastodon, Acoma, Kalki, others, Pleroma as well. ActivityPub just exists. It's seamless-ish communication between instances. I say ish because, well, these diagrams are very nice, but they sometimes don't account for issues. It allows for easy bridge building. There's no algorithm to generate engagement, which is good and bad. The networks are smaller, but they're also more interactive. Valid, unveiled at DEF CON, fully decentralized, no trust hierarchy at all, multimodal system of you have a core, you have many applications that can be built on this, every node pitches in, beautiful. I actually ran a few nodes a few times just for fun. It works. I just want to see it work better. And you have many projects that you could do. Just having WebRing, that's funny. ASN peering, also funny. Writing a bridge for systems, also funny. Writing an app, also funny. Rolling your own crypto, don't, but also funny. So, kind of halfway through, it did tell me I did have the full 45 minutes at the beginning because of the whole issues, and we're 25 minutes in, so, yeah. This isn't really a niche concept any longer. Entities like the European Commission have established and maintained an active presence on the European Commission. On the Fediverse, sorry. Many industry peers have established presences there. It's fun to interact with real people that aren't basing everything based on engagement. And this is an enjoyable concept. But now we can kind of move on to the motivations. Why would one want to do this? Well, there's a bunch of legislative strands which are, let's say, worrisome. There's the Online Safety Bill in the UK, which, if you've read any kind of communication about that, is not genial. France has a new law, which is basically the Online Safety Bill, but French. The EU has EIDAS 2.0, which is itself, why wouldn't you have trusted by default root certificates that whatever. EU also has the chat control bill, which is basically the online safety bill, but European and actually worse. You have a bunch of worrisome phrasing. So you have multiple things that can be simultaneously true. Children are at risk on the internet. Yes, that is true. Breaking encryption does not make anyone safer. You can't just put a backdoor and assume that only good people can use the backdoor. That's not how encryption works. That's not how math works. But yeah, so the NCA is a National Crime Agency posting, we'll no longer be able to keep children safe on the platform. Fuck you. Just seriously, fuck the NCA. I hope no one's from the NCA here. But this is entirely bullshit. Entirely. But moving away from the rage fest for 5 minutes, yes, our corporate overlords are spying on us. Android phones have bloatware, a bunch of it. Play Store and services, more things that track exactly what app you're using at what time and for what. Tracking analytics across the wazoo. Windows does the exact same thing with bloatware and the Microsoft Store and all the other telemetry services that exist. The Apple ecosystem. It's just the entire ecosystem. I'm just not even going to go into it. And so you could just make the choice and go like, oh yeah, I just want to go on Calyx OS or whatever other non-Googleified OS you want. And yeah, you could. But also you're losing certain conveniences that you might want. But hey, privacy is a human right. Maybe not legally everywhere. Like, it's not written in the law. It certainly isn't in the UK. But it should be. And a corporation government should not know anything about, well, first of all, our sex lives, for example. Just the most easy example I could give to just disincentivize people from the government knowing what they do. Know our purchases, our watch history, our habits, our shopping list, our letters to Santa. Fuck it. Why? Just end-to-end encrypt that. Only one condition to privacy is just that math is used as intended and math is not broken. If you design a system to be broken by using math that leads to it being broken, not just one person can abuse this. And anything that isn't encrypted is sure to be abused. Twitter engineers were admitting to reading DMs. Facebook Messenger only implemented E2E like days ago. Like, okay, but certainly there's legitimate targets for legislation, right? You have bulletproof hosting services, forums which have hate crimes or hate speech hosted on them, forums with documents which target children, just in a documented fashion, platforms known to host APTs, all that jazz. Those are terrible places that, yes, should be the target of legislation. However, we shouldn't target how these people are conversing, but the actual people conversing. Then you can just say, these people are doing X, Y, and Z, and we should criminalize that, not the platform that is hosting them, for example. Or depending if it's the platform that is done for this, then yes, but whatever. That then becomes illegal, whatever. And there's a gray area. Because of course there's a gray area. Services like Library Genesis, Sci-Hub are considered illegal in some areas. In France, you can't even access them. Just your ISP will tell you no, it doesn't exist. But their use is less unfair if you consider that, first of all, people don't actually make money off of like the publications they do. They get paid in engagement and or views or whatever. And most of the time they actually have to pay journals to be posted. Some books don't exist anymore. Just don't exist except a digital version somewhere on out there. And so if you think, what even is ownership, right? So I saw a post the other day. Someone couldn't find Battlestar Galactica, so not that old of a series, right? On any of the streaming services they had. We're losing certain aspects of culture, which you can only find in various places on the internet nowadays. PlayStation, most recently, like a week ago, announced that they were saying that all Discovery shows that they had on the platform due to licensing agreements would no longer be available to customers that had paid for them, with no intentions of reimbursing, nothing. What the hell? So if we just take a hypothetical, because these are things that have already been established, if SoundCloud were to poof out of existence from one day to the other, how much would be lost, right? 250 million tracks. The contributions or data generated by 76 million users, and the hobby of 175 million listeners. That's not nice. If you needed more motivation, big networks currently are just serving you ads and making money off of them. You're literally cattle for that. I'm sorry. Hyper-analytical of your every move, trying to monetize that analysis. Centrally analytical of all your visits across all the things where they're deployed, Google Analytics being everywhere, and, them being them. Pushing trends on the consumer, so like everything that has to do with AI and shitification, Bing, whatever the names of the other AI chatbots exist. It's like, I'm not even going to go into Home Assistants, like please. Moving on. Can we be too decentralized? Is there such a thing? Every single open source thing that has their wiki on a Discord server or their downloads on a Discord server. Why? There's several limitations to this, right? I need to join a public sometimes with no code of conduct, unknown place. I need to find the resource, and link to the resource is now ephemeral, right? Because the CDN they implemented new rotation for their CDN of links. Right, IPFS, Worldwide Content Delivery System. Yay, why not? Makes use of blockchain, less yay. Has proven effective in cases of anti-censorship, all those Sci-Hub, and other bits that I mentioned earlier. Academic media access. But you don't need to host your blog. That's silly. Right? I hope everyone can agree on this. Cool. Mastodon is hard, allegedly. It's not the easiest thing ever to get used to, right? There's risk of administrators losing faith. It's harder to find the entire information you're looking for, to scrape that information. There's also bad people everywhere, just like with every other service. And power and capabilities have some consequences, such as whatever happened with bad space, which I encourage you to read up on, because I'm trying to skim a bit. So that's my corner of the Fediverse. It's not mine, but it's the one I reside on, tech.lgbt. There's a bunch of places around it. It's very nice. But it's also there's a lot of space there. There's a lot of things, there's a lot of people. And everything needs administrators and mods. Do we need to rely on accounts of very nice people? Not exactly. But any independent business has these same limitations. The question is, how do we make it easier for them? Because most of these people are not paid for this, right? Yeah. And a something-verse is a place with n+1 things, right? There's new and extensible protocols that allow systems to talk to one another that are required. We also need bridges between systems, because every time someone builds up a system, you need to communicate with that system. And this, of course, brings forward the XKCD, so I remixed this one with Fediverse platforms, because it just holds true all the time. Yes, the XKCD script font is available on the internet. You can download it and use it commercial free. And yeah, so not every geek with a Commodore 64 can hack into NASA. People have heard that sentence before if you listen to Nerdcore. But some form of literacy, technical literacy, is required. You need a lot of disciplines together, network engineering, all that jazz, systems administration. And people are required, people that aren't necessarily in there, are not too involved, to stay fair and equitable to people. And mistakes will happen. Anyone remember BGP incident for Facebook a few years ago? Yeah. And yeah, legislation as well. Who has control or viewership of your data? What is the service's jurisdiction? How can you get content taken down? What is the service's SLA? All those are very legitimate questions. So coming to the end, because this is a cybersecurity conference, yeah, part where cybersecurity is actually in this talk, we lost a lot. So Twitter no longer exists as an ecosystem, a one-stop shop for information. Threat intelligence just dried up. Means of engagement, if you can pay for engagement, just does not work anymore. You need to seek out people to find them, and monetizing engagement means that people will lie on the internet for money. And it gives you a lot of vulnerable things. So Mastodon had CVE for domain spoofing, one of them for translation features allowing injection. Matrix had inline SVG embedded scripts. Veiled even had one recently for DOSing due to decompression size checks. It exists. It's a sizable learning curve. There are a lot of systems to familiarize ourselves with. Jurisdictions and data protection are important considerations. Everything requires more effort, and we're behind. Everyone's behind on the curve on this. Everyone, including myself, and everyone probably in this room, unless someone had already heard about all these issues. Maybe a few, yeah. So just one small thing before I end. The part where you take back control. Hosting your old content. The world needs more silly little blogs. You can do it from scratch, but you don't need to do it from scratch, but you can control the information displayed, how you monetize, how you track people. And that is a good thing. Skipping over that. Build your own crypto. Learn where to fail, but don't put in prod, seriously. So that was me trying to do that, and I never put in prod, obviously. And now, to conclude, the world is your oyster for all of this. Is decentralization a good thing? It depends, I told you. Depends on who is at the source, who has access, what was it built for, how can you trust them, most importantly. And abuse is not the raison d'etre of a lot of these things, but they will be abused. So to conclude, it is a good thing. We just need to use it more and use it correctly. And here's my socials. I'll be available for questions outside because people are shaming me out. Yes. That's me done.